the Audio Production Town Hall. We talk about everything audio, from studio recording to post-production, game audio, the works. So, fourth Monday of every month, you'll find us here talking about audio-related topics. Today we'll be talking about efficiencies and workflow for being a better sound designer. Getting a job is one thing, but then keeping a job and being able to deliver high quality material on a regular basis is another thing. That's what we'll talk about today with our guest, wholesale alum, Chris Kokkinos. He's currently the senior sound designer at PlayStation Studios. So he's graciously taking some time out to talk with us today about how he's able to work efficiently in his job, having worked on games such as God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 and others. So welcome, Chris. Glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I appreciate it. It's always good to see you, Eric.
Yeah, likewise. So, we focus mainly on, creating really good sounds and how to implement them, and the creative process and all that.
Yeah, I got it unmuted.
Students studying wholesale have to get accustomed to deadlines and delivering material in a timely fashion, just as they would in the workplace. It doesn't matter if you're a freelancer, if you're working in-house, somebody's telling you, we need this by X time, and you've got to deliver, especially if it's crunch time or something. So we hope to pick your brain and find out how you, deliver high-quality content on a regular basis. So I guess the first question is, what's your top thing, I guess, for working efficiently as a sound designer?
Oh boy, it's a big one. Well, first and foremost, I gotta express here for a second. For me, I know that I'm not always the strongest when it comes to sound design. So therefore, I rely heavily on finding efficiencies, right? So if you feel like maybe sound design isn't exactly like you're not the best sound designer in the world, or not the best mixer in the world, I think making up for that in other places is very important. So for me, I've found ways to efficiently, get to the deadline, and that's usually by way of templatizing things, right? Maybe I know that every cinematic has to be, done a specific way, so I'm going to create a template that I can use for every type of cinematic. It's like a baseline, right? And then on top of that, it's creating like plugin chains. Again, it's effectively just the word template, but just used in different forms, right?
Right.
So
it's like session template. You've got templates for how you're going to process the sounds.
Precisely.
And then you've also got to factor in, selecting the material. You were saying, you don't feel like you're the strongest sound designer out there, so are you relying more heavily on like pre-existing library material? Yep. I guess one question could be is, we don't want to go too far into tool sets necessarily, but our students mainly have to source sounds from like a web portal or custom recording. What kind of software are you using to find good source material quickly?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's always there's a myriad of websites out there that will help sell you. They'll sell you different sound effects libraries. So like a sound effect is great. Not Sonus. Yeah, Sonus. Great resources to find more boutique, smaller libraries. And then of course, we've talked about Sound Dogs, or Soundly. I think is also pretty decent. I think even Pro Sound Effects might have something in that realm with SoundQ. So I think in terms of libraries, there's a myriad of options out there, just all varying degrees of cost. But I will say, a lot of the times I speak to students, they're like, oh, I have to record this sound and make it very bespoke and very custom. It's like, yeah, it's wonderful, it's great. But unless you have, I don't know, a set of Sennheiser 8040s at your disposal, or maybe some other high quality gear in a very nice quiet room to do these recordings, it might behoove you to maybe just start small and buy small boutique libraries to kind of build things out. You can manipulate those sounds more easily. Some of them are recorded with really wonderful gear and sold at really decent prices. I definitely think that libraries out there have become really, really prominent and very well used. And I have access to a whole Foley stage with PlayStation, so we have a lot of our own internal recordings, and it's been wonderful to use a lot of that. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I reach for a lot of Boom library content or sound effects library content, SoundMorph, all great resources.
How are you guys managing those libraries? I know you said you're working remotely now, or your main team is in California, and you're remoting in from Texas. So are they pretty much leaving it up to you to kind of self-manage your own tool set, or is everybody on the team kind of using similar things?
Yeah, one thing I think you'll find is if you go to any studio, a lot of the times shared resources, buying multiple seats for libraries and so on. So we use SoundMiner as our database tool of choice. I am semi-reluctant to mention SoundMiner while it's technically industry standard. A lot of reasons it's also quite expensive. I realize it's not particularly budget-friendly to newcomers. I will say I do know SoundQ is pretty well priced, and then a couple of colleagues of mine are working on another tool called Distort. You can look at distortapp.com. I've got a chance to beta test it. It's great. I think it's going to be a wonderful tool. But I digress. To answer your question, yeah, we have our head of technology for our audio department. They're the keepers of all of our libraries. We have everything on a SoundMiner server, and we all have individual SoundMiner clients that we can access. And then we'll get something with like 15 terabyte hard drive with sounds.
Those have all been, the metadata's all been formatted in a way where you're going to be able to find material you need quickly. That's super important that a lot of students don't necessarily think about metadata. It's not an exciting topic necessarily, but if there's not good metadata, you're not going to find good material to work with, and then it's going to slow you down. You're not finding the right material.
I can't tell you, there's nothing more frustrating than looking for, say, I don't know, Poland as a word, and then whoever this library company is like, well, we're just going to include in the metadata every possible word that can be used for every single sound in this library. So I'll head into the room, and it won't even minimize the amount of sounds I'm looking for. I started with 1,000 sounds, like it's like 998 sounds. I'm like, but are the other two sounds here not qualifying as a balloon? I don't really know that's what was happening. I'm talking like monster world, like balloons. Like I don't get this. So I think to go back to the efficiency part, I actually really think mention metadata. Planning ahead is very, very, very important, and I think metadata is one of those things.
What are you looking for?
If you put it in the right which the UCS naming convention is kind of the new
universal category system.
I get my acronyms mixed up, but I'm pretty sure, it's UCS, right? Yeah.
Yeah, universal category system.
Yeah, it's like the way to metadata all of your data. Like it will tell you like, hey, if it's a vehicle, these are the acronyms to use. If it's a explosive or if it's a whatever, it's like, here are the acronyms you should use, and they kind of go into some further detail. This was a big project by like Tim Nielsen and Kai Paquin and a few others that were like, we're tired of everyone making up their own version of metadata. So if you ever, I know a lot of students who have gotten into the idea of like making their own little libraries for maybe supplemental income or to get their name out there, which I think is actually really brilliant. To just kind of put your library out there and be like, hey, I've got some sounds if you want to try to use them. It's been really neat to see new, fresh content from new perspectives. But yes, baking in metadata is very, 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 very important.
So like, do you have like a list of like go-to keywords or different phrases that help you find stuff more efficiently? Like, SoundMiner has a lot of different tools in it to organize your sound library. Like, are you basically just using it off the shelf as handed to you by your administrators or company or what have you, or are you able to go in and customize it and say like, okay, here's my like custom palette of sounds, like I've got a preset here for different things I tend to go to, or are you more or less just saying, I don't know what I'm going to be looking for today, I know I need some kind of sounds in this kind of category, I'm just going to search and see what happens? Or do you kind of try to organize your massive library by the sound of it to try and pre-group things so that you can find them more easily? Is that part of your process?
I feel like you are incredibly good at asking questions because you just set me up for the most efficient thing I've ever worked with in my life in SoundMiner and other database tools. They all have their own version of this word, but playlists.
Mhm.
Playlists are by and large one of the best possible tools you can have. Anytime I'm like, okay, I have to work on a gun, right? And I'm like, cool, I'm gonna start sifting through the billions of files that we have for different guns. I'm like, cool, 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 cool. And then all of a sudden I find like, I don't know, like this weird like gun monster. And it's like, whoa, what is this sound? I don't know what this is, but it's super dope. So I will just grab that sound and I will throw it in a playlist of like just super dope sounds or monster sounds, whatever I want to call it. And you'd be surprised at how often I end up filling up those playlists with content that I think is really interesting and neat and unique.
Like I don't need it
Um,
right now, but I know I'll probably want to use this in the future. So let's just
Precisely.
kind of earmark this so I don't lose it. 'Cause if you've got hundreds of thousands of sounds, the
Yep.
odds of you stumbling on it again aren't great. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
let's save you for
And
later. You're a good one.
that's exactly it. And I think there is one negative downside. One negative downside to using playlists, and it's that sometimes you get so comfortable in using those sounds that you end up kind of going back to the well for the same
Right.
flavor of sound. And so it's a
Oh, you're
boon
using this
until it
gunshot again.
Yes. Yes, I can name like four sounds off the top of my head from different libraries, like their entire name, and be like, yeah, I know that sound. I hear that sound in like every
my
video game
dreams.
trailer ever. Yeah, I hear it everywhere. It's like the Wilhelm scream, but different sounds at this point for me.
Nice. So, okay, so
Um,
you find good source. You've got workflows in place for sourcing good material, and then you've got to be able to get that efficiently into your DAW template. So for students who haven't used those types of database tools before, one of the main selling points for them is that you can very rapidly transfer them to a specific location on your timeline. If you want a specific sound, you can spot it right to the timeline, or you can say, okay, I know I'm going to need 100 gunshots for this scene or this moment in a game or something. So I'm going to batch transfer all of those into Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever all at once, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to Sound Dogs and I'm going to download each sound individually. I'm going to put it in a folder. You can more efficiently get a lot of material into your DAW sessions. You can start working with it right away. I know you've got a lot of different templates for different purposes, depending on what you're working on, whether it's a linear cinematic or whether it's interactive gameplay. I think you did bring something with you today to show off, a cinematic template, I believe, in
yeah.
Pro Tools. So I don't know if you want to dive into that a little bit, just to say, okay, once you've found good source and you have material to work with, how do you organize it in your session? How do you, process it and get it, edited in a way that is conducive to you then mixing it and the rest of your process?
Yeah. So, I had a good chat with Eric before this about templates. I think, what you see here, I'm using this as my disclaimer. What you see here is my template that I've made. I'm not saying like I claim ownership of it. I'm mostly just saying that for me specifically, this is how my brain works. There are fundamental aspects of this that I think are important to note, and I will touch on those. But um, I had to work recently on a giant global cinematic with some of my colleagues at PlayStation for the entire studio to use for cinematics, and there were a lot of head scratchers because the routing was intensely complicated. Some people work from bottom to top, some people work from top to bottom, really depending on what your background is, what you're comfortable with. So I'm saying all that as a disclaimer. So what you see here, let's just use it as a guideline for your own personal templates. Um, so how I typically work, golly, I'm having to relearn all of my shortcuts as we work here today, which is also very important to note when we talk about efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
My keyboard is being funny. When we talk about efficiencies, it's important to note that the quick keys of any DAW you're going to use will be what really make your life substantially easier. So I have become you know, I've kind of got it down in my head that I know all of my shortcuts. I can't tell you what they are. My fingers just know what they are. So I
Just
just kind
muscle
of
memory.
it's all muscle memory at this
Mm-hmm.
point. I'm basically like Naruto over here, just kind of like doing some crazy things with my fingers. And next thing you know, I'm like, cool, I've solved all of the global problems. But from the top to the bottom here, just to kind of give you the rundown, it's important that every template I have for cinematics obviously has an audio and video track. This is just kind of where I'll keep things. You'll notice some of the stuff is grayed out. This is because I've shifted recently to a Reaper on my PC, so some of the setup here is a little bit funky, but again, guidelines, right? So from the top to the bottom, yeah, video and audio, very important. I always have a first frame of picture marker here at 1 hour. That way I know where to line my video up, especially when I'm working with other folks, as long as we're on the same page. Very important to note this. If you are working with people and it's not just you and you're working on a cinematic, you need to make sure, I hope, I can't see anybody there, but I hope you're writing this down. Make sure everyone starts at the same time code. If you don't do that, you are bound to have a very bad time when it comes to merging content. And then to minimize like the length of waiting, you can set your session start to be 59:30, so you just have a little bit of lead up, and then it's not, a whole hour of lead up into this moment. I used Command 2 to open this window, session setup. So there you go, pro tip. Dope. On to the next. So video, audio, pretty straightforward. I always have a meter. It's important to note this if you don't already know. Loudness metering is key for, I don't have my lock on here for this, but loudness metering is key for cinematics. We're not measuring in dB full scale. We're not really measuring in, what RMS or what have you. It's LUFS and LKFS is kind of the key thing to focus on. So make sure you have one of these in every session. WLM Plus is cheap. It's like $20, I think, on sale typically. There are some free ones out there too.
I still think Pro Tools has a built-in LUFS meter yet, does it?
I don't think so. I mean, if they have, then they've added it since I moved to Reaper, but yeah, I'm not super sure. So the meter here is effectively just metering everything going to the entire output. That way it's just getting all the data, all the information. From there, downwards we go. The print folder here, it doesn't need to be this substantial. Again, it's how my brain works. I've got the full mix print master. This is so that I can just print everything to one spot. Some people are like, oh, Chris, well, why don't you offline print? And it's because patching prints is important. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten something to final when I was working on Ruby at Rooster Teeth. And they'd be like, oh, we need to change this one specific thing at the very end of the episode. I'm like, cool. If I offline print this whole thing, then I might have to wait for a longer print. Some of those things take longer with surround sound, et cetera. But if I do a quick patch print, I could print it into the session, right over the thing, crossfade between them, make a nice clean, transition, and then I can play it back and make sure everything's working fine. Sometimes offline prints also have issues with time-based effects, so bear that in mind. It's also super important for me to have stems always ready to go because you never know when people are going to ask for them.
So this looks to be like, so far, correct me if I'm wrong, you focus on like mixing elements of it. Is this a combination edit and mix template? Or do you have separate templates for each?
We're on our way down to the sound design part.
Cool.
Yep. So I wanted to cover that part because I think it's important. People often forget that mix is important. I also can't tell you how many people I've talked to who, like, for some reason kind of put it out of their heads that they need to have their printing and routing structure together. Super duper important. Should never be an afterthought. It will save your bacon 9 times out of 10. Let's get into the editorial side of it. Food groups. Food groups are very important when it comes to sound design and sound editing. And by that, I mean, let's go ahead and minimize this real quick. Oop. And by that, I mean, I will make sub buses for every food group I'm working on. So if these are my explosions, this is where my explosions live. I have typically 5-6 mono tracks, 5 to 6 stereo tracks. And then if you have, 5.0, 5.1, quad, et cetera, if you have a ultimate license or what have you, it's important to include those things. It's kind of a rinse and repeat at this point for me. I'll do a lot of, here are my guns and here's my, I don't know, Foley content. And so, come on, Pro Tools, wake up. Thank you. And so this is just a good, clean way to keep your session neat, easy to open, and if someone else looks at it, they won't lose their mind. And it's not hard to just add 6 more tracks in here. It's very, very, very easy, right?
You've got your
And
color-coded different food groups, different elements in
Yep.
individual folder tracks, and then
Yep.
the feeder tracks, you can apply effects individually, but then what advantage of the folder track, you can apply processing to everything at once, correct? Is that part of your workflow? Are you tending to process things more individually, or all as a group for more efficiency, or a bit of both?
It's a little bit of A, a little bit of B. So what I'll find is a lot of the times I'll be like, cool, if like, let's say I have, I don't know, an AK-47 as my, that's like explosions. I have a C4 explosive on this thing, and I know that I really want to, saturate the heck out of this sound. Well, I'll go ahead and start doing specific things to this. I don't like to audio suite stuff as much these days, just because it's harder to track down and kind of go back to. And so I'll just put it on the track, and then I'll, if I need to bypass it for some other sounds later, I can. And then what I'll do is, assuming, let's say, I've got all these sounds down here and they're doing their own things. What I'll do then is I'll go to the tippy top here, and I always have, say, this is actually really clamped up. I'll typically have it up to like 30 or 35 hertz. I'll typically do like a shave off of like everything above 20K, because nothing can be heard really up here. Sometimes I'll even shave it down further. You'd be surprised at how much you get back from this. But this is like effectively every bus structure I have has at least one Pro Q instance or EQ instance on it with exactly this setup. And I'll modulate based on what it is. But the idea here, right, is like Eric had mentioned, like I will add, whatever I need to add to the track itself, be it, decapitator or whatever, like some saturation tool. And then I will work my way to the tippy top to then add, multi-band compressor like Pro MB or whatever the case may be, so that I can treat all the sounds and glue them together, right? Individual tracks to make them sound cool, bus structures to glue sounds together to make them feel like they exist in one space. And then you can go one step even higher than that, which I do here, to glue the entire experience together. So it's buses on buses on buses, basically. So I can't stress the importance of this enough. I think that if you have a master aux where you do your limiting, your big EQ passes, some light compression, whatever it is you have to do, and then you do your explosions, you treat your food groups as such, and then you treat your tracks. Though let's, for those of you writing and taking notes, invert that, right? I would maybe treat my individual track first, get all of my tracks feeling good, then I would move up to my bus, treat that, make sure those things feel good, and then all of my buses together, I'll work together to make them sound good. Cool. So, yeah, you're all the way up. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so I'm watching you put different effects inserts on different tracks and different types of sounds. Do you have any workflow efficiencies or anything as far as, saving effects chains or having sort of those preset kind of chains that you would apply to certain types of effects, like explosions or, special magic sounds or whatever it might be? Do you have a workflow for having just certain go-to effects that you can call up on a regular basis? I mean, that too falls into the kind of, you don't want to get into that cookie cutter mindset, but at the same time, and working, more efficiently, it can definitely help to have that kind of thing. Do you have a workflow in place for that?
I do. So I will say it's actually interesting to note the most times I've ever used like a set of plugins that I'm just like, this is the chain I always need, is for like Red versus Blue, the helmet filter. It has to be the same in every single episode. So we already had basically just, you can go through here and say, hey, I need to save out this plugin chain, or I need to save this preset. So I know that I have to save my saturation settings to be, whatever. So you can get as granular as, hey, I'm going to do, I want to do this with all of these things. This is going to sound so incredibly cool. This is amazing. Wow. It sounds so good. I love it so much. I'm going to save this as, Kokkinos Decapitator, which is a cool metal name, 01. And now I have that for the future, right? I know that this is what gives that sound grit, and I can use this time and time again. But what sounds cooler than Decapitator one time? What is it? I can't remember my control. Here we go. Is it Shift Option? It is Option. There it is. We got there. 2 decapitators. Now we have 2 of them. Now they sound extra good. And now I'm like, hey, this is a really cool sounding chain. I can then go through and come on, play, like work with me here. Ugh. Where is it? I just did this yesterday too. Sorry, everybody. I've gone over to Reaper. I've become one of those internal or the game audio people who does specifically Reaper things now. There's a setting in here to save your presets, and I will find it. And if I don't find it in the next 10 seconds, then we can move on with our lives. But anyways, what I would do is effectively save out this as a series of plugins as a full chain. And that makes it so that I can effectively just recall all of those effects in one quick and easy go. I'm mildly embarrassed because I used to be such a Pro Tools wizard.
So,
real quick, before we jump off of it, I do want to just share one quick efficiency that people seem to not know about. If you open up an insert, or if you open up an input, or if you open up a send or whatever, if you start to type what the thing you are looking for is, so in this case, Pro MB, it will give you a search function. That's one of the best efficiencies that I can offer everybody I've ever met that works in Pro Tools. It saves so much time.
For sure. Good tip.
Yeah. I'll figure that out while you're asking your next question.
So, this is mainly for your cinematics team. Are they still primarily working in Pro Tools, and on the implementation side, are they like on the nonlinear side? Are they working more in Reaper? Is that the case?
That is correct. Also, I figured it out. You just have to left click, not right click like a dummy. Save track preset. There it is. Then you can choose what you save from there. Anyways, sorry, I digress. So I found after years and years and years, I've worked in Pro Tools now since 2005 or whatever. I have a fondness for Pro Tools. I think it's great at what it does, but I also think it has its limitations, whereas Reaper, on the other hand, is great for what it does. And I think to more specifically speak to those things, I think Pro Tools handles cinematic content substantially better. I think they've been doing film and linear media for ages, right? Yeah. That's kind of the tool that's been around. But, it has its pitfalls. Sometimes it's, sometimes it lags, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it comes with bugs, it's gotten substantially better over the last 5 years, but.
Right. But would you say, like, on the Reaper side, one of the main advantages from a nonlinear standpoint is like batch processing? Would you say that's an element that's maybe not as strong on the Pro Tools side?
That's exactly it. I think that, cost notwithstanding, because Pro Tools is, comes with a fee, but it's great for cinematics. I think it's good for making one long print of a sound, or you could bounce in and export batch out. I could still do my job in Pro Tools if I needed to work in here, but in Reaper, I just have more flexibility. I can make sub projects that I can then render into a master project. And then from there, I can jump off of Pro Tools here. And then from there, we can, print out, we can export out the entire project, and it'll be, 1,000 files that all live within their own specific sub projects for specific, things. It would make more sense, to show how that workflow goes. But yeah, they have their blessings and curses of both sides of the coin. So PlayStation uses cinematics for cinematics, Pro Tools specifically. That is just never going to change as far as I know, especially because we interface with a lot of big studios, a lot of third-party companies. If we send us stuff to mix for trailers, whatever the case may be, everyone works in Pro Tools. Whereas with game audio and small game assets and stuff, it's the numbers of Reaper to Pro Tools users is substantial.
So is there anything else efficiency-wise that you find stronger in Reaper from a game audio perspective? Batch processing being one. You were mentioning earlier avoiding audio suite processing in Pro Tools because of wanting to go back and forth. One strength of Reaper has always been that sort of non-destructive processing aspect of it.
Precisely.
Where, you can have effects applied at the clip level and easily make tweaks? I mean, would you factor that into your efficiencies as well on the Reaper
100%.
side?
Yeah, I think so. Something you had asked me the other day was in talking about Keyboard Maestro and macros. I think Keyboard Maestro is fantastic. I used that when we were editing a lot of Foley, Footsteps, and all that other stuff in Pro Tools. I just created a macro and Keyboard Maestro all the way through. I can't recommend enough. If I can show it, I have two of these. My Stream Decks.
Stream Decks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got a smaller one, then I have a XL here. They are both full of things. So with Keyboard Maestro, I think it's it's nice to have. It's additional, an additional way to do macros and things. But like you had mentioned, for Reaper, you can add non-destructive plugins to your clips, which can get a little weighty if you do that too much and you start adding a lot of processing. So be careful with that. But the most important thing I think for me is the ability to create my own internal quick keys without the need of something like auto hotkey, or like you can use a Keyboard Maestro adjacent or macro tool like auto hotkey and kind of create your own scripts for things. But Reaper out of the gate just gives you the ability to be like, cool, I'm going to go to my shortcuts. I'm going to say, hey, I want to be able to add Decapitator with Control-Shift-9 on the numpad, and then I can turn that into a Stream Deck button, and next thing you know it, I've got a full Stream Deck of, let me just quickly add this plugin so I don't have to go searching for anything. So you want to talk about efficiency? That's like mad efficient.
So the Stream Deck allows you to not have to necessarily remember all of your hotkeys. It's push a button, and that's labeled for you, and that's a bunch of macros bundled into one little button that you can press, and then it does the thing, right?
Yep, it's exactly it. I think, being able to like look and be like, oh yeah, here's multiband or multipass or kilohertz phase shifter or whatever it is that I'm using at the time. It's funny, I just started talking about my Stream Decks. They both just went to sleep, so couldn't pull up any.
So you find Keyboard Maestro is more useful for, on the Pro Tools side, because the key commands are locked, they're fixed, they're not going anywhere. If you want to, take some kind of process that involves menus or multiple hotkeys, you can kind of combine those together into a workflow in Keyboard Maestro. On the Reaper side, when you're doing game assets, you pretty much don't need Keyboard Maestro at that point. Essentially, you're just relying on the built-in scriptability and workflows in Reaper to just create your own custom actions for things you do regularly. Is there a challenge for you working with your teammates where, with Reaper, there's no standard sort of workflow? Everybody can kind of create their own custom thing. Does that ever become an impediment and not an advantage?
That is a great question. It's something we've talked about quite a bit. So we do have so one of the other beauties of Reaper is that our entire layout of the entire DAW is custom. We have a Creative Arts custom layout that Steven Schaffler, who's a brilliant sound designer, has put together with the help of some other folks at the studio. But it basically is like everyone has the same buttons at the top. The hotkeys and macros, however, I do know that one of the things that was always kind of interesting was like, if I went to someone else's room and I was like, oh yeah, let me show you how to do this. Well, their quick keys are going to be slightly different from mine. Doesn't mean the session is different. If I opened it at my machine, I would have my macros or my quick keys. But to go to their desk and do things sometimes could be a little bit more, more difficult to manage.
You don't have this installed. You don't have that installed.
But I mean, that's anywhere, right? If you don't have, like for me, I have plugins that some other folks don't have or what have you. So it's really kind of like a, give and take on a lot of those sides. But yeah.
So we identified a few different workflow things that students could check out. Keyboard Maestro, certainly Reaper's affordable. You can download the demo and play with it for quite a while without committing to it. Stream Deck. Is there any other tools or plugins or anything that you can think of that make your life easier on a daily basis?
Yeah, let me think. Plugins, tools. I can't recommend enough. Learning your hotkeys. I think that if you could walk away with anything today, like right now you go home and you start to practice just learning quick keys for your tool, your DAW, you're going to be like a wizard. You will surpass all expectations when it comes to just speed and time. And like I said at the very beginning of this, like I know I'm not the strongest sound designer in the world. I mean, I'm decent enough to continue to be doing this as a career, but I do think that the way that I have saved myself many a time is, well, I know how to maneuver through a project very quickly because of the quick keys. So if I could tell you to walk away with something today and just kind of start practicing, it's learning your quick keys. And Reaper you can kind of make your own, but with Pro Tools it's a little bit more strict. I'd say learn those. Don't just fall on the niceties of Reaper just because it's convenient, right? Like it's nice to have, but even in Reaper, we've worked hard to mimic a lot of the Pro Tools shortcuts so people can kind of jump back and forth to some extent, that is. Yeah, we talked about SoundMiner, we talked about database tools. What else? Both DAWs. We've talked about kind of some of the efficiencies of using quick keys and macros.
I think your last point about, saying, you keep saying to yourself that you're not the greatest sound designer, but you can work efficiently. I think, one big takeaway for students is, it's great to be, talented and skilled, but if you can't deliver high quality material on time, then it really doesn't matter how good you are, So being able, having to blend that and kind of be a little bit of both. Like, you want to deliver good work consistently, but at the same time, you've got to be efficient. You got to be able to meet deadlines and deliver stuff consistently on point.
It's funny. We were talking about like what other tools and other things that we could use for efficiency, but I think it's actually, for me, the efficiencies I've learned rely more heavily on the things that I've learned to do to make life better. One thing that I cannot recommend enough to people, don't be afraid to just make massive broad strokes to start. And by that, I mean, what I'll do is, like, let's say I'm working on a minute-long cut of something or a 10-minute-long cut of something, whatever the case may be. I will take an explosion or a gun or whatever, because I know there are guns in this thing, and I will use the same gun sound for every single instance of that gun. Now, that's not going to final. I'm not saying that that's what I ship with. But what I find is if I can just fill out the palette, it's almost like, it's like painting. You're painting the background. You're just kind of giving it life. Because I find that, for me specifically, and maybe for some of you out there, just having a plain white background is incredibly, incredibly daunting. You don't really know where to start. You don't know how to build. You don't know what to do. And so you just kind of just do the thing. But if you start to fill out the palette with sounds, it starts to become more of a, okay, well, these sounds work, these sounds don't. I can change this. I can update that. I can modulate this. And so now you had 10 of the same gun sounds across the board. Maybe you only kept 2 of them or 3 of them, but maybe they're processed very differently. So now they sound different. That was one of the things I discovered, because when we were working on Ruby and Red versus Blue back in like 2018. In camp, we were working on like 3 shows at the same time, and there were only 3 of us at the time working. It was insane. And so we were like, how do we do this as fast as humanly possible and also make a show that sounds good? And, I'm credit where credit's due. Our team was incredible. We got nominated for multiple awards against like shows like Chernobyl. Like, what's this weird anime web show about these Huntress girls doing next to Chernobyl and killing Eve? Like, what? So it was just this idea that if we can kind of get the sounds on the timeline and then go, it becomes less of a daunting excursion and more of a,
just away from the blank page. Just get something on the page that you can build off of, for sure.
Yep. That's it.
All right. So I don't know if we have any questions or not. No questions at this time? Okay. Well, cool. Well, I think then, if that's about it, we can kind of wrap things up, unless you want to have anything else to add in closing.
It's important to start working on your library, obviously, sooner than later. Take note, if you look up andrewvscott.com, his website, go to his blog. He has how to start your library for free. He's also a full sailor. He's a good friend of mine, and he has very graciously put together that blog page. So it's funny, every time I do these, I always give him a shout out, because I think credit where credit's due. But further, be kind to yourself on your journeys. It took me 10 years to learn these quick keys, and trying to show you a couple things here, I've already forgotten some of them because I haven't used it. It's like a language, you got to keep doing it for it to be fresh. And then, of course, like I said, don't let that big, daunting white canvas scare you. Just get sounds on the board. Everyone has to start somewhere.
Yep.
And that's it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for taking time to talk with us today. I think we're just about out of time. So everybody remember that we do these town hall events every month, fourth Monday of the month. So be sure to check these out. If you weren't able to join it live, remember there will be a recording on the YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. So let's thank the show production students, the audiovisual technologies class who run these events every month, as well as course director John Coast. So I think that's going to wrap things up for us. Great job, everybody. And thanks for joining us. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks.